Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, and today we're going to be looking at some Emerson College polling and comparing that to 4 years ago. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want more content just like this. And so pretty much guys, we see here that right now Donald Trump maintains a pretty good edge in a lot of these swing states. We can see over here that Donald Trump is ahead by basically 4 in Arizona. He's ahead by 4 in Georgia. He's ahead by 1 in Michigan. He's ahead by 3 in Nevada, 2 in Pennsylvania, and 4 in Wisconsin. Or actually, I think it's about 3 in Wisconsin. He's ahead by like around 3 points. And so we see that the former president essentially is leading all of the swing states fairly easily compared to just around 4 years ago, by the way, because a lot of the state polls overestimated Biden a pretty ridiculous amount. And you're actually going to see here that I'm going to fill in the 2020 results really quick, except for the states that they polled, just to give you guys an idea of where everything will end up. We're going to leave Nebraska second there, but essentially they had him leading in Georgia. They had him leading in Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and they even had him leading in Minnesota, by the way. In the polling for Emerson, literally just the other week, they actually had Minnesota leading for Trump. So he literally picks off all the swing states plus Minnesota with the new polling. Now, if we go back to 2020, we'll actually see that they were literally polling people on George Floyd. Like, there was literally, this is exactly when this happened. And so essentially, you saw a plurality of people essentially basically trusting the police force to protect American citizens. So that was pretty interesting back then. We saw Biden actually led by 4 points, and then when you factored in undecideds, ended up being like 53 to 47. That's roughly where the popular vote actually kind of ended up being. It was around like 51.2 to 46.9. So this kind of overestimated Biden a tiny bit. And so we see that there were also a couple of people who were disaffected from Trump that kind of voted for the libertarian candidate that probably otherwise would have voted for Biden. That's probably why you saw this discrepancy. But really, this national poll was actually fairly accurate for back then in June. This was a fairly accurate poll because it had Biden ahead by 4, and 53 to 47 is not terribly off. You probably would have been able to predict the Electoral College 100% if you had that popular vote. And we see that, slightly more Trump voters were enthusiastic to turn out than Biden voters. Like, it was kind of that. But we saw Biden ahead in national polling. Now, Emerson has Trump up by like 6 or 7 points in all their national polls now, at least over 3 or 4 points. He leads all of them by a pretty substantial amount. And I think it's really important to note as well that in the Rust Belt, the polling errors are abysmal. I'm talking about in Wisconsin, the polls could be 7 points off. In Michigan, the polls could be 2 or 4 points off. In Pennsylvania, they tend to be a little bit more accurate, but they could sometimes be, a point or two off. So these polling errors up here are abysmal, and they always tend to underestimate Republicans on the presidential level. The reason why the midterms they were more accurate, more like basically like most state polls, was because of the fact that when you poll people, it tends to be the more enthusiastic kind of voter or the more politically involved voter. And when you have midterms, the people that usually are kind of only low propensity voters during presidential years don't really turn out that much. And so you see a little bit more accurate national polling because it's only the people that are most excited to vote that would answer pollsters, or at least that lean a little bit more college educated. And the thing is, when you see that, you pretty much see a more college educated sample during midterms. And what's quite interesting is that Republicans used to do good with that group. That's where they got underestimated by a lot in certain midterms like 2010, and even, well, not 2020, but 2014. They got very underestimated because they used to do better with college educated voters. Now they really don't. Now Democrats do better with them, and that's why you kind of saw Democrats outperform. And also in early voting, That also played a huge factor too, because if you actually looked at the polls in like late September, early October, they were actually all correct or pretty much close to the actual results during that time period. It's just that you had Democrats that were starting to vote in late September, early October for early voting. So once you vote, why are you going to answer a poll? That literally doesn't make any sense. And so that's why you saw Dr. Oz take the lead against Fetterman. That's why you saw Tudor Dixon close the gap between Grant and Whitmer, because we basically saw all the Democrats that early voted early stop answering pollsters. That's why you saw that. And if we would have been able to deduce that, we would have been able to know, okay, well, the polls are probably going to be wrong, but in favor of Democrats, because we should have known based off the fact that midterm polls are more accurate, that an R+2 national environment wasn't really going to be all that good for Republicans, considering that New York, Florida, and California were going to be more Republican. We could have assumed back then, okay, that's going to be most of the shift. All the other states are going to be roughly the same. And so that's why we should have been able to deduce that this was not going to be as big of a red wave as a 2014 or a 2010. But now, on the presidential level, Republicans, especially with Trump, have always been underestimated by a pretty significant amount, anywhere from 3 to even up to 5 points, depending on what aggregate you even look at. And so now that Trump essentially leads the aggregate by a point or so, we're going to see Donald Trump probably win the popular vote by around 4 or 5. Me and Gold Crown Politics, our consensus popular vote is around Trump plus 6.8, and that kind of factors in third party candidates and whatnot. I think it's going to be Trump plus 4, Trump plus 5. That would essentially end up with this, Donald Trump would get 328 electoral college votes, and you would see Virginia and New Hampshire and Maine at large probably still be blue and Trump plus 4, to be honest, because these states are trending a lot to the left, and I think it would be pretty hard to flip one of these. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see that actually occur, where you get this map if the popular votes like Trump plus 4 plus 5. Maybe New Hampshire flips, maybe Maine at large in Virginia. That would give 347. However, I could see that once we start getting into Trump plus 5.5, that's when you kind of see those states actually flip. But if the Trump popular vote ends up being like plus 4 or so, which right now I think Trump leads the aggregate by 1.9. So if we assume a 3-point miss, that's going to give Donald Trump Virginia, New Hampshire, and Maine at large. And this is the map that we currently have right now as our consensus forecast. But however, we do see as of right now that even in Emerson College polling, Donald Trump is quite ahead in all the swing states. And that's a bad warning sign for Biden, because Biden's only path is through the 4 states up here, is through the Rust Belt. He only has one path to win, because in Georgia, Trump's polling outside the margin of error. In Arizona, he's polling outside the margin of error. Nevada, he's polling outside the margin of error. And so that's why you see some of these states basically out of Biden's column, because he's polling outside the margin of error there at that point. And all the states, and by the way, just to give you a heads up, all the states that Biden was polling outside the margin of error in 2020, he ended up getting every single one of those states. That includes Virginia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. He got every single state he was polling outside the margin of error, and he got all of them. And so if we apply that same logic to Trump being outside the margin of error in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, he probably has 268 going into election night. And the victory in Arizona may actually be easier than most people are suspecting, because there's a large Hispanic population there. Trump's been gaining with Hispanics recently. And there is a new poll from SoCal Research, who we're actually doing a national poll with very soon. He did a poll with Red Eagle Politics to poll Maricopa County. And we actually see that the former president is leading there by 5 points. If you shift that on Election Shuffler, we could actually look this up right now. So, like, let's hypothetically say that Donald Trump ends up winning it by 5, right? Let's say he wins Maricopa by 5 points, right? If that were to actually happen, we would essentially see Donald Trump win the state by almost 5 points. The state would be a 4.5 point victory for Donald Trump if he were to win Maricopa by 5. And that's not even touching the rest of the state. Let's say that let's say that the rest of the state ends up shifting like 2 or 3 points to the right. Let's say that happens. Just as a hypothetical scenario, right? Let's say that ends up happening. Let's say this moves by 5, and let's be friendly and say, okay, everything's going to move by like 2 points to the right. Let's say that happens. If that were to happen, Trump wins the state by 5. He wins the state by 5 points. And I expect some of these counties to move by more than 5 points to the right. So a likely margin of victory in the state of Arizona is not that far out of reach, especially with the polling data having Trump up by 4 points. So that's roughly what we're seeing there. All the data is aligning up for that to be the case. And so that is crazy that Arizona has gone from a state where, oh, Biden may be able to pick it off to I really doubt he's going to be able to pick it off now. And really, his only path is the Rust Belt. And really, his main worry should be Pennsylvania because Republicans have gained in voter registration there. They've actually gained. And Trump is about to announce his VP pick very, very soon. And if it's Burgum, it may not really affect anything. But if it's a Ben Carson, that's going to really put him ahead in a place like Michigan and Wisconsin, in my personal opinion. That's really going to give him the advantage. And even to an extent, Minnesota, I think it even give him the advantage there, really help him kind of cement his victories in some of those states. But that's Biden's only path to the White House. And voter registrations in Pennsylvania, the governor there decided to do automatic voting registration to help Democrats, and it actually backfired on them. He actually ended up having Republicans close the gap of voter registration by 350,000 votes. And it was like a 700,000 vote lead for Democrats, and it's been cut in half. So, and that's been since 2022, not before that. So if you want to say, oh, well, it happened before the midterms and Republicans still lost, nope, that happened after the midterms. And so that is going to be a bad sign for Republicans, even Democrats on the state level. That's going to be a problem because they cut their voting registration lead in half. That's a huge deal. And so, as of right now, guys, Donald Trump leads in every single swing state, including Minnesota, in the latest Emerson College polling. And this puts Donald Trump in a great position to win the Electoral College. So make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this, and I will see you guys in the next video.